Incoherent response, were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought?
I just love that opening, It's just funny. It's from an Adam Sandler movie about rational thoughts or someone who's going to say something that's just very interesting or important or useful. And in our case, today's show for Author Brand Show, I've got a digital breakthrough strategy, a specialist in transformational change. This guy's got over 20 years experience in private equity, distressed acquisitions, is a turnaround global transformation executive. He's built his whole career on rapid, radical, and change with breakthrough growth. These are all things that everybody wants. He's worked overseas in China and the US. He's a strategy designer. He's a behavioral strategist, so be careful what you say. And he loves to work on the intersection of strategy, transformation, and most importantly, people. So no matter what the company, this holds true time and time again. Great strategist, and he's a wonderful person to talk to. So I'm very happy to bring on our guest today. This is chair and consultant, Mr. Brad Cousins. Brad, how are you today?
Good. How are you doing, Doug? It's great to be with you, and hopefully I'll provide some rational thought and not some.
I'm sure you do. Like if it's not rational, it could at least be controversial, interesting, or as I said earlier, useful. So people are going to watch this and go, okay, why should you listen to this guy? So give me a bullet point on what they're going to learn today.
Well, look, like I tell people, I'm built for crisis. That's what I've done. So I think one of the things that I have to offer your listeners and viewers is how to build themselves better for crisis. Very relevant as we're all coming out of a pandemic. Yeah. And part of that, as you talked about, I live at the intersection of strategy, people, change management, transformation. The biggest part of that is managing yourself, managing your emotions.
Yeah. You mentioned that earlier, and I find that fascinating because most people in the corporate environment, they're usually focusing on, systems, operations, people, culture, leadership. And you're talking about managing your own emotions. Well, how have you seen that show up with the clients you've worked with?
Well, the best analogy I can point to is we all have been to the emergency room, or most of us have been, right? The last thing you want there is a doctor that's overwhelmed, that can't make a decision because he's so under pressure, so nervous, so all these things. Those are muscles that you build over time. Why? Because the uncomfortable is comfortable to that doctor, right? Our crisis is his normal. It's every day for him. I clock in at 9, I leave at 5. I live in your crisis. So it's a perspective, it's a mindset. A lot of that is we tend to approach these crises and they're triggering our emotions. And we're not recognizing that our judgment and our decision making are impacted by the emotional overload we're sensing.
Wow. I love the emergency room analogy. I hadn't heard that before. It's really, really powerful. I talked to some people who, in military and police and whatnot that have their crisis muscles trained a little bit better than the average person because they're in, life and death stuff. So they're a little bit more prepared for that. But most business leaders, entrepreneurs are not. What do you do to help get them prepared for that kind of thing?
So I think, the key is, and this is where entrepreneurs come from. They grow up through crisis, especially if they're a startup, right? It's a series of crises of increasing impact. That's how you build muscles over time, right? From where I come from, private equity, distressed acquisitions and turnarounds, we were always buying companies out of bankruptcy. You always walk in the door and these employees have been through the ringer. They've been in bankruptcy. Some of them have been laid off. They've had their pay cut, their benefits cut. They're scared. And the last thing they want is a guy that comes in a panic. And so the reason I say I live at the intersection of people is that's what makes strategy go. Out of today's crisis is the mother of tomorrow's invention, right? So whatever crisis comes today is an opportunity. And I think it's really a mindset shift of, looking at every crisis as an opportunity to do something different. Why? Because we're all human. We all get comfortable. It's not until we have that crisis that we really go through the change that's needed.
Right. Well, what did you do to get to that level? Is it all just over time, or did you do anything special to get yourself? We're going to talk about one of your stories in a few minutes here, but what did you do to
well,
train
a lot of this we're born with.
Yeah.
It's personality to a certain degree. So one thing is recognizing who you are,
Okay.
being aware of who you are, what your triggers are. We've all heard that. Well, that guy, he embraces change.
Yeah.
But are there people that embrace crisis? I think so. I think there's people that run to the car wreck outside, and there's people that shy away from it. There's people that run in to help, and there's people that get scared. And so part of it is recognizing yourself and your own triggers. So how did I get to it? You build the muscle over time. I think it's some of it's not taking the easy path. Some of us went through college the hard way. We ground it out. We took 6 years instead of 4. We took 5 years instead of 3. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is that recognizing that people and the ability to bring people in to that space with you, motivate them, leverage them to the point of which you're a collective and moving forward, I think is a key.
Okay. Or maybe some people develop their muscle by being chased through dark alleys at night by the Chinese police or something like that.
There's always some of those great stories. I think, I was fortunate in my career. I had some great mentors and some great people that placed a lot of trust in me to go to places in the world that others would not, to take risks that others would not. And I think that's the story of most entrepreneurs. Mine's a little different. Yeah, there's some stories in there.
I dropped that for people that was a prompt for you, my friend. I want to hear that again, because the way that it's going to be in your upcoming book, I know. But give them one story about that, either the police chase or the firing of the whole factory floor. Both of those were like, it sounded to me for like you're like a very stressful times.
Yeah, I'll leave the probably the police one to the book. I think it's best told in a larger, longer format. But the factory, and I've turned around several companies in China, which adds a totally different element. It's one thing, and I think I embrace those challenges. It's one thing that, I'm from the South, so it's one thing to walk into a factory here in the South where the good old boys, you can say, hey, y'all, and you got that. It's quite another when you walk into an operation around the world. And that one was one where you hear all these stories about expat managers being held captive in closets and all of this. It takes a different level of moxie, right? That old term, grit. But you walk in there and that you've got a whole group, of bad actors, and you hear from the people what needs to happen. It's balancing and having that control of emotion that says, this is the rational decision that has to be done, and I got to pull the trigger and do it.
Give me I want to hear the whole story again. Go ahead, just share it. People want to know this. This is such a good one.
Yeah. So I walk into it's an automotive factory. It's a turnaround in China. I'm their president of that operation. Been there for about 60 days. Realized that I've got a what I refer to in my management work as a terrorist on board as my plant manager, and he's loaded the factory at least half with people from his hometown, 8 hours away.
Yep.
And so I've got this little faction in there, and the factory's located next to a vocational school. So we've got all this great new talent, but productivity is just not picking up. There's still problems on the floor. People are kind of hesitant about buying into the system.
Yeah.
And so I decided the plant manager's got to go. And so I terminate the plant manager. Plant manager runs out on the floor, orchestrates a pretty big work stoppage. I come out with my HR person, who's my right-hand person and translator. And so I'm out there listening to some of the complaints, and I've got the whole first shift factory floor there. I don't know, 60 people.
Okay.
And I'll never forget this one young guy. He spoke great English. Couldn't have been more than 19 years old. He says, they called me Laoban, which is big boss over there. Laoban. We want to work. We know what to do is right, but these other guys, they threaten us, and they tell us, well, who are you talking about? Well, all of these other senior guys physically threaten us if we do that. So, it's that moment. It's an inflection moment, and you make the decision. And so I said, hey, this whole side of the room is now terminated. You can see HR, and you can pick up your checks, and we'll move on down the line. And so,
like half the company, or what? Half the
it was let's call it 40 to 50%. It was a very sizable chunk side of the room. And so, I said, you can see HR, you'll pick up your last month's wage, and we'll see you. Thank you for your service. And so I go back to my office. The plant manager comes and says, you're not leaving here. You're staying here into the factory. And I said, no, I've got a train to make, and I'm leaving. And so I just, he kind of made a halfway effort to hold me in the room. And I just said, let's not go there. It's over. And just picked up my briefcase and walked. Was my adrenaline pumping? Was my heart beating? Yeah. I didn't have my Apple Watch there then to tell me heart rate too high. But the results right after that, the next day, immediately that factory went to 125% of standard production rates. 125% over productivity rates. Yeah. We hired all the people we needed, and from then on, that I think that factory 2 years later was 10 times the employee count of what it was.
Wow.
We did work for Volkswagen, Emerson Steel, large multinational companies. We were finally landing those projects. But it's realizing in those, and some people call it intuition, some people call it gut feel. I don't think it's that. I mean, there's emotions in play. You have to realize, okay, here's the course that needs to be made. I need to make this decision, and we need to make it and move on. Entrepreneurs make those decisions every day that are in crisis as they're building. You do it probably with your business.
Sure.
Hey, I'm at the point I gotta make this decision, and
there's
not a right or wrong answer. There's a decision that needs to be made.
It's a really good lesson. I remember reading some stories this past few weeks of companies that did a mass firing on Zoom where it's safe. I could put 100 people on Zoom and say, hey, this is your last day. But when you're on a foreign country on the factory floor, entrenched people there, and you say, you guys, this is your last day, out of here. I mean, I don't know if any more part of the, Chinese gang or something would have been a little bit nervous, but
that's a different story in the book. You already alluded to that story.
I know. We'll get to that one later. Definitely check out the book. It's called Built for Crisis. It'll be available very shortly here on Amazon. Check it out. Interesting stuff, Brad. So you're embracing it, right? Because some people say they love crisis or disruption. Is that really true, or they just learn to deal with it?
I don't think anyone loves crisis, right? We don't love crisis. I think and some of it comes with maturity, right? Emotional intelligence in general, and equanimity, which is this level load, this level emotions, that comes really with maturity. When we talk about developing leaders and developing leadership and emotional intelligence, what we're really talking about is creating awareness and mindfulness. Now, what you can do is get into those situations and we'll call it safe crisis, right?
Yeah.
Safe things to go do and build your muscles over time. Walking into factories, I've walked into many factories, whether it be Australia, China, wherever, and companies. That's a bit different. That's a little far out there. You're in a different land, different legal system, different language, culture, everything. But, you can manage the crises you can manage. You cannot shy away from them. It still goes back to those basic reptilian brain, human things of fight, flight, or freeze. You have those choices the more you're in those situations. And we have to recognize we all built muscle over the pandemic the last 2 years. Now, what you do with that muscle is a different thing.
That is very, very appropriate. And the thing you said earlier about making a decision, there's an old saying in entrepreneur world that you hire slow and fire fast. But most entrepreneurs do the exact opposite. I need somebody. I need to put somebody on staff. They hire someone. Oh, I got to fire him. I'll just let him go for a while. You know, and I think you've got that nailed. You right attitude for that.
Yeah, well, that's the worst thing you can do. I tell people you can either build empires to recruit people, or you can build empires to retain people. The choice is really up to you. I've got clients and people that I work with that you walk in the door and they've got 5, 10, 20 recruiters there. And for every one person they're hiring, there's 2 people leaving out the back door, and there's just a churn going on. So, that's, when it comes to hiring the right people, yes, you can find people that embrace the change, embrace the crisis, that are wired to do that already. But there's a mindfulness that comes, even if you're wired, there's certain trigger points that you really need to understand.
Right. It's interesting. I've known you for a while. I'm watching you, do all these things with Vistage, whatnot. You've nailed a lot of things in terms of crisis and embracing change and that intersection you talk about. What about you personally? Was there something in your life that made you decide to go down this route? Go back to the young Brad.
Yeah, I kind of grew up. I think I learned a lot of this from my father. He was one that always loved the next challenge. Left home when he was 15. Literally worked 2 jobs and put himself through school. And I remember at 5 years old graduating. And he, so I come from that very poor, Mississippi roots. And so there's a lot of grit instilled from that. Grandfather on one side was a farmer, and those meek means. Me personally, I have a little different view now. Perspective. Was married for 17 years, lost a wife to cancer. That was a pretty big turning point in my life. A crisis you can't manage, a crisis nonetheless. But I think it's that nothing is really put in front of us that we can't handle. And I think if you continue to look, most people that get to, before we got on there, we were talking about your more than salt and pepper beard, but those of us that get that salt in our hair kind of realize, we look back, a lot of these things that were put before us, nothing was put there to break us, but it really made us stronger for that next big challenge.
Yeah, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All these trite sayings that we can easily embrace once a crisis is abated, right? Okay, I've been through, whether it's divorce, bankruptcy, whatever it is, or passing someone loved one passing. On the back side of that, we go, oh yes, I become a better man from it. But when you're in the middle of it, it sometimes clouds our view, our perspective. I believe, at least it did for me.
Well, all decisions are emotional.
Yeah,
you got to realize that. And there's a difference in problem solving and making decisions, right? Problem solving is dealing with stuff in the present and the past. Making decisions is really about the future, right? And so, when you approach these crises, a lot of people tend to approach it and want to do a woe is me. You have to quickly assess what is going on and plot a course. And that's how I made my money. That's how we bought companies. I had a piece of the action. We went in, quickly assess, don't live in the past a lot, but quickly assess where you are, where you need to go, and quickly assess the people you need to get you there.
Right.
And I'm not one of these guys that's, you may sound like, oh my gosh, he's another Chainsaw Al that came in there and just fired it.
Hatchet man.
Never did that in private equity. I really, if anything, I was always accused of keeping people too long. I always had a 3-strike rule. I'll try you in 3 different seats.
Right.
If it doesn't work, I feel I've done my part as a leader. I've tried to put you in places to succeed, and you just didn't work. But you really have to quickly assess who is key. Who are the key people on the team that you need to surround yourself with? Because a key thing to remember is, as a leader, the crisis says your success is only about 20% determined by you.
Yeah.
The rest of it is the people you surround yourself with, the environment that you're in, and the strategy and vision you put forth.
Love it.
Most people try to take all of it on themselves. Like, this is my crisis. I own it. I'm going to grind us through it. No, you have to approach it, assess it, set the vision, set the future, put the team in place, and then empower them to give them the resources they need.
I love that. That's a great segue into my big question here in terms of the right people in the right seats and whatnot. It's one thing to have a crisis come up to you, bang, here it is, COVID, or, something big, like recession or factory burning or something. But it's the slow ones, I think, that catch a lot of people, that just trickle in slowly, and all of a sudden you wake up and go, oh, crap, right? And one of those that comes to mind is this, this term now, the Great Resignation, and getting people in those seats when there's not as many people apparently that want to sit down with you. Do you have any advice or input on the talent pool out there?
Hey, I don't want to sound too fluffy, but I'm going to go back to mindset. If you go into this thinking that there's scarcity, you'll come from a place of a fixed mindset and trying to protect too much. There's an abundance of people out there.
Okay.
They just may not want to work for you.
Oh, awareness.
And that's the key. The key is, this is an economic thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't believe it. The employee relationship is a cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, right.
What's it costing me what's the benefits to overcome the costs of me working for you? And we try to, to change that from an economic situation by providing culture and a great work environment and all these things. And those are good for a certain degree. Right. But, at the end of the day, you've got to surround yourself with the right people. Mm-hmm. And so understanding who you've got and the talent you got, because one thing, the big fallacy of us as leaders is we're our own biggest heroes. And we tend to surround ourselves with people like us. Why? Because we're the most fabulous, normal people we know. And so the worst thing you can do is construct this team that's like you. Because, right? Then you got a bunch of yes men that, hey, Brad, you're awesome. And you keep doing you. You need these people that are going to challenge you. You need these people you need a well-rounded, good balanced team that can handle this crisis. Now, the other thing is recognizing the different temperaments you have on the team, the different personalities, and how each of those respond differently to crisis. Because everybody gets triggered in a different way, and you can read that in their personalities and emotional and intelligence assessments. There's a whole host of tools you could bring to bear on this.
Sure.
That are all out there in one way or another in management land and speak. There's tons of guys like, running around giving assessments and stuff. It's having that right combination to really recognize, adaptability and resilience and those types of things to help you overcome those problems.
Yeah. You have me at, you find what you're looking for. If you think there's a weak talent pool, that's what you're going to see.
Yeah. And I've got clients that have just totally embraced this. They've said, what? We were having a hard time finding developers and coders in Little Rock, Arkansas. Yeah. And now the whole world has opened up to us because we figured out remote. And by the way, instead of paying, $30,000 a month rent, now we have a office space that's $2,000 a month just for board meetings and video conferencing. And they've embraced it. And they figured out how to manage teams in India and how to do these and how to integrate those teams with you. They figured out the hard problems. Why? Because the crisis of the pandemic forced them to do it. They I've got clients that have offices and headquarters in the U.S. and offices in India and China. And we have all these problems. We can't get the teams to work together, and it's a huge cost. But you know what? They figured it out through the pandemic, and now it's opened up huge pools of talent to them.
That brings me to another topic that I'd love to have you chime in on, because I've talked to a couple of high-profile people in robotics, AI, and some people that look at the futurists, whatnot. And there's two schools of camp here, right? Two sets of people. One's like, every time there's a disruption in technology, we're going to lose a lot of jobs. And and the other person says, where also we create a lot of jobs. You know, we get rid of the CD manufacturers, the streaming guys, you know, have a lot of jobs. And lately, I've heard a lot of people say this time it's different, you know, with the whole robotic cars and, you know, the Boston Dynamics dogs and all these things that we see here of automation, especially in the artificial intelligence world. It's going to eliminate more jobs than ever. And it's going to be, you know, a different kind of great resignation. So that's one camp. The other camp was a conversation I had with the chief data scientist at Intel when I brought up the, you know, the Terminator series. Hey, man, you know, these guys are going to take over and kill us all.
Skynet, yeah.
And he said, well, he doesn't see it that way. Again, he saw what he's looking for. But he said, I can tell you right now, there's over, I think he said 2,000 job descriptions they don't know how to write yet for the merging of AI and robotics and whatnot. And there's over, he said, over 250,000 jobs they can't even fill because they don't know how to define a person who needs to design robotic arms that resemble muscles and stuff. There's so many things that we haven't even figured out yet. And so his mind, yeah, there's going to be more jobs, more high tech perhaps, but more overall. So you've seen a lot of manufacturing and service, everything. I'd like to get your take on the future.
So there is some research, and I wish I could remember it so I could call it out, so your listeners could go to it. But there is some research from a few years ago that said somewhere around 85% of the jobs that are needed 20 years from now don't exist right now. And I think it's probably real similar to what your Intel guest was referring to. You know, we don't know what we don't know. You know, the future holds a lot. Once again, like I said earlier, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. Crisis drives all this. You know, autonomous vehicles, yes, they're going to become, I think we're going to see them more on the semi-truck side because of shortage of drivers, right? And yes, we are going to lose jobs, but there are going to be other jobs recreated. You know, I think back to my generation, and I think you and I have talked about this before, just in passing, but my generation is probably the last generation that remembers growing up and going to a grandparent's farm.
Yeah.
They don't exist anymore. Why? Because my parents' generation left the farm. Farms became, you know, so I remember my uncles and stuff. Prior to that, you had the Industrial Revolution that took a lot of people from the farms. They couldn't imagine that. Right? And then they went to the factories. And then during our lifetime, we've seen them leave the factories and move into knowledge work, and that be iterated on a few times. And we're seeing them shift around. Everybody, there was a rush. We need all these people to code, and we need all these coders. And now coding has been automated through artificial intelligence. The fact of the matter is, you can't automate relationships. You can't automate creativity. You can't automate all of those things. So not
yet. I've seen those Japanese sex robots, Brad.
Yeah,
they're pretty nice gals.
They're pretty nice, but you know, only people can learn.
Right.
You know, AI is, you know, assimilates data and pulls data together. We got to have all that. There's a net opening of jobs, and a lot of people say, well, it's workforce participation. Those numbers are out there. Bureau of Labor and Statistics has those numbers. We've got high participation rates, even if you took all the people that are on any kind of government assistance. The problem is, globally, in industrialized countries, we haven't been having babies. The young people haven't been having babies like they normally do. And that includes China. Of course, they have rules around that. But the fact of the matter is, we have to have all of this invention and this innovation. Why? Because we have a crisis of people. And we're seeing it in the restaurants and the housekeeping jobs and these lower end jobs. Why? Because those people are moving up. They're bettering themselves. That's what we want as a society. We want people better. But the fact of the matter is, the rest of us see it as less people to take my order at the restaurant or bring stuff out. And we'll solve those problems. We'll figure those out.
I agree 100%. Right. I mean, the whole thing, the last big debate on minimum wage about, you know, can't make a living wage at McDonald's. Like, You're not supposed to. It's supposed to be a temporary job for a season or a year or two or something. You're supposed to get out of that. You're supposed to do it as a career, right? So
they're not set up to give you phenomenal benefits and all. McDonald's is a great place, and there's great franchisees and franchisors out there, but those are entry level jobs. Those are require less skills. So once again, crisis. That's the thing. Without crisis, there would be no reason to change.
Mm-hmm.
And today's new novel inventions become tomorrow's expectation, right? Mm-hmm. What's new and novel today is an expectation tomorrow. But keep this in mind too. There's not really a whole lot of new ideas out there.
Yeah.
Amazon, and I think this isn't, I may be giving away too much in the book. I probably should have more teasers out there, but in the book, I think, we talk about the fact Amazon is not a new concept. It is the Sears Roebuck catalog just put online. They just, because Sears got too comfortable and didn't have a good enough crisis early enough. They sat back with big department stores and real estate and instead of taking their catalog, their big thick that we used to get when I was little.
That's that.
You circled them in the catalog for grandma and grandpa. They just put that online. Blockbuster, Netflix. Netflix was going to buy Blockbuster, Blockbuster was going to buy Netflix, and we'll just, we'll go a different route.
Right.
All Netflix did is serve up videos to us in a different way. All Vudu does is rent movies to us in a different way that Blockbuster already had.
Right.
Blockbuster became too comfortable, and they didn't take advantage of the crisis.
Yeah, keep in mind, my parents had Netflix before it went streaming. We just rented the DVD unlimited. It came in the mail, and you could send it back whenever you wanted to. That was their USP. It's like, okay, we're gonna rent DVD, and there's no late fees. It was a big deal. You just have it shipped in the mail and hold it for a day or a year. We don't care.
Well, and that was the thing. That was the Netflix idea. Mail order rental. But the business model went through a crisis, and they're like, this ain't working. We can't make this work. And so crisis of market share business model drove them to a different delivery service, which was video on demand streaming over the top.
They got a good buffering system or something there to make it work. So it's hardly ever pickups.
That's right. So all these crises are there as opportunities for us.
Yeah.
And that's where great entrepreneurs and great leaders come in. We recognize these crises, and they put together businesses to go attack these crises. The problem is they get comfortable. And when we get comfortable, that's when we cease to innovate.
Yes, that's when we swoop in and destroy the competition.
Yeah. So the trick is, how can you get comfortable being uncomfortable?
Right. That's a trick. And it's laid out in your book that's coming out, Built for Crisis by Brad Cousins. In the meantime, is there anything you want to do give away, an assessment or a link or something, or just your website to the viewers here? I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Visit I got a couple websites. Visit this website for you at engagehcs.com. You'll find out a little bit about some of the team dynamic stuff, work we're doing around resilience, some of the research I've got going there, and assessments that you can take. All free. Jump in there, read some of the resources, take some of those at engagehcs.com.
Engagehcs.com. Check it out. Brad, thank you so much for being on the show today. Appreciate it. Hopefully come back soon and we'll share some more wisdom.
All right. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, you bet. That concludes the show for today. I'm your host, Doug Crow from the Author Your Brand Show. You're going to want to take notes. I hope you did. If not, show notes are below along with Brad's link to his assessments. Check it out. Until next time, it's your host, Doug Crow. Have a good day.